The Sahel whispers secrets when the rains forget to fall. You can feel it in the air, heavy and expectant, hanging over the dunes like a promise unfulfilled. The sand shifts restlessly beneath your feet. Camels raise their heads, nostrils flaring. Nomads scan the horizon not for oases, but for the dark smudge of clouds that never materialize. In a distant camp, a weathered matriarch adjusts her indigo veil and walks alone towards an ancient acacia, her silver bangles chiming like distant thunder on a cloudless day. Here, in lands where the sun reigns supreme and thirst is an ancient companion, the arrival of rain is not merely a wish. It is the difference between abundance and famine, between peace and conflict, between life itself and the creeping spectre of death. And so unfolds the tale of the rain callers. Individuals marked by destiny, revered and feared in equal measure. Those who dared to bridge the gap between earth and sky, to plead with unseen forces on behalf of their people, who performed intricate rituals and made sacrifices to coax life-giving water from an unyielding sky. This night, we venture into the heart of the sun, to the grand markets of Timbuktu and the wind-carved canyons of the Air Mountains, to an era when a single raindrop could tip the scales of empires and drought could unravel the fabric of entire societies. Let us recline on woven mats beneath the vast canopy of stars. The night air carries a hint of coolness now. The constellations wheel overhead like silent guardians. And the wind, the wind. It murmurs tales long buried beneath sand and myth. We pause here, letting the moment settle. The embers of our fire glow softly, and we find ourselves cradled in the arms of the desert night. In this land of extremes, where golden dunes meet the deepest blue of sky, time moves differently. The sun etches its path across barren landscapes, marking days that blur into weeks, into months of relentless dry. Yet the people endure, their spirits as resilient as the hardy acacia that clings to life in the harshest of conditions. Villages become islands in a sea of sand, each one a testament to human perseverance. Children with bright eyes and sun-darkened skin play games that mimic the rituals of their elders, tracing patterns in the dust, whispering make-believe incantations to phantom clouds. Their laughter rings out, a defiant melody against the backdrop of an unforgiving climate. In the heart of each settlement stands the rain-caller's dwelling, set apart by strings of cowrie shells and bundles of sacred herbs. These are the intermediaries between the mortal world and the capricious realm of weather spirits. Their knowledge is passed down through generations, a tapestry of wisdom woven from observation, intuition, and the whispered secrets of ancestors long gone. As twilight paints the sky in shades of amber and indigo, the rain-caller emerges. Her steps are measured, her gaze fixed on some distant point beyond the horizon. In her hands, she carries tools of her trade, a calabash rattle filled with sacred seeds, feathers from birds that soar closest to the heavens, a staff adorned with symbols whose meanings are known only to the initiated. The village gathers, a living circle of hope and trepidation. They watch as she begins her dance, her movements a conversation with unseen forces. Her voice rises and falls, a chant that seems to resonate with the very bones of the earth. As night deepens, the stars themselves appear to lean closer, bearing witness to this age-old negotiation between humanity and the elements. Hours pass, marked only by the shifting of shadows and the steady rhythm of the rain-caller's voice. And then, a change. A breeze stirs, carrying with it the faintest scent of moisture. The air grows heavy, pregnant with possibility. In the distance, a low rumble breaks the silence. Hearts quicken, breaths are held. The rain-caller's movements become more urgent. her voice rising to match the growing intensity of the wind. And then, like a gift from the gods themselves, the first drops fall, tentative at first, then with growing confidence, until the heavens open and water cascades from the sky in sheets of liquid silver. Shouts of joy erupt from parched throats. Children dance in the downpour, their small bodies glistening in the starlight. The earth drinks deeply, greedily, as if afraid this bounty might vanish as quickly as it appeared. In this moment, all hardships are forgotten. The spectre of drought recedes, if only for a time. As dawn breaks, painting the world anew, the rain caller stands alone once more. Her work is done. For now, but the cycle will begin again, as it has for countless generations. For in this land where life hangs in the balance between sun and cloud, those who can speak to the sky will always be needed. The wind whispers once more, carrying the scent of damp earth and renewed hope. And we, witnesses to this ancient dance between humanity and nature, are left in awe of the delicate balance that sustains life in even the harshest of realms. They called him Rubdun, chosen by the elders not for his strength, but for the silence in his eyes and the strange way animals followed him through the bush. He walked barefoot on thorns without bleeding. When he spoke, it was in riddles. And when he fasted, he drank no water. Not even on the third day, the people trusted him and feared him. To be a rainmaker in the Sultanates of the Horn was not a role one begged for. It was passed through whispers, tested in secret, and confirmed only after miracles. A cow giving birth on the driest morning, a bird nesting in the drought season, a sudden breeze that cooled a fever. But the calling came with danger. In Hara, Zyla, and the dusty plains near Babara, sultans leaned on rainmakers, not just for crops, but for legitimacy. If rains failed 3 seasons in a row, the people did not blame the sky. They blamed the rainmaker. Some were banished, some were stoned. A few simply disappeared into the bush, never to return. The rituals were grueling. He would sleep under no roof for 7 days. No fire, no speech. Only herbs and charcoal. On the 8th night, before dawn, he would draw ancient symbols into the soil. Circles within circles, zigzagging like lightning, using burnt twigs dipped in goat blood. Each symbol meant something. One called the wind, another invited thunder, but the final symbol, the spiral that curled inward, was the most dangerous. That one dared the spirits to listen. Let's pause here for a moment. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the stars. The people gathered before sunrise. Old women brought incense and elated softly. Young warriors stood alert, spears in hand, scanning the horizon not for enemies, but clouds somewhere in the crowd. The Sultan's advisor watched with sharp eyes, and the rainmaker, he did not perform. He entered. His body swayed like grass in wind. He sang in a forgotten tongue. His feet stirred dust. His voice rose in tones that felt older than words. Sometimes he wept, sometimes he fell. But always, always, he ended in silence, arms wide, eyes skyward. And then they waited. Days passed. If the rains came, he was called blessed, fed the finest meat, given gold and goats. Sometimes even a wife from the Sultan's house. But if the skies stayed cruel, whispers spread fast, his heart is not pure. ... He did not fast long enough. ... He was seen eating fish from the forbidden coast. Faith turned to suspicion. Suspicion turned to fear. And fear, in drought-struck kingdoms, was more dangerous than any sword. Let's pause here for a moment. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the stars. In the stillness of night, beneath a canopy of stars that seem to whisper ancient secrets, the Rubdun's tale unfolds like mist across the parched earth. His was a path, walked in solitude, each step a prayer, each breath an offering to the sky above. The elders spoke of how he came to them, this man with eyes that held the depth of hidden wells. They say he appeared one evening as the sun dipped low and painted the horizon in hues of amber and gold. No one knew from where he came, only that the desert winds seemed to carry him like a seed borne on invisible currents. Children would watch him from afar, their curiosity mingled with awe. They saw how birds would alight upon his shoulders without fear, how even the most skittish gazelle would pause in its flight to regard him with gentle eyes. In his presence, the very air seemed to hum with an energy that made the hairs on one's arm stand on end. But it was his fasts that truly set him apart. When drought gripped the land with merciless fingers, when the earth cracked and split like the parched lips of a dying man, the Rubdun would retreat into the wilderness. For days on end, he would neither eat nor drink, his body becoming a vessel for something greater than himself. On the third day, when lesser men would have faltered and fallen, he emerged. His eyes shone with an inner light, his steps sure despite the weakness that should have claimed him, and in his wake a coolness would settle upon the air, a promise of rains to come. The people watched and wondered, hope and fear intertwining in their hearts like vines. For in the Rubdun they saw both salvation and peril. His power was a double-edged sword, capable of bringing life-giving rains or invoking the wrath of spirits long forgotten. In the markets of Hara, where spices perfumed the air and colorful fabrics fluttered in the breeze, hushed voices spoke of rainmakers past. They told of one who had called down a deluge so fierce it had washed away entire villages. Another, they said, had been struck by lightning when his hubris led him to challenge the sky itself. And so, when the Rubdun walked among them, the people bowed their heads in reverence, even as their eyes darted nervously to the heavens above. For who could truly know the mind of one who spoke to the clouds, who danced with the wind, who held the fate of kingdoms in his calloused hands? Let's pause here for a moment. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the stars. As night deepens and the world grows still, we return to the rituals that bound the Rubdun to his sacred duty. Picture, if you will, the lone figure beneath the acacia tree, his white robes ghostly in the pre-dawn light. His bare feet press into soil that has not felt the touch of rain in far too long. For 7 days and 7 nights, he has lived as one with the earth. No roof has sheltered him from the searing sun or the chill of desert nights. No fire has warmed his hands or cooked his food. His voice has remained silent, save for the whispered prayers that escape his lips like wisps of smoke. Now, as the 8th night gives way to the promise of a new day, he kneels upon the ground, his hands, trembling slightly from exhaustion and anticipation, grasp a charred twig. With slow, deliberate movements, he begins to draw. The symbols emerge from the darkness, each one a story, a plea, an invocation to forces beyond mortal understanding. Circles within circles speak of the endless cycle of seasons. Jagged lines evoke the flash of lightning that heralds the coming storm. And always, always, the spiral that curls inward, daring the spirits to bend their ear to mortal supplication. As he works, the air grows heavy with expectation. The old women arrive first, their wrinkled hands clutching bundles of fragrant herbs and smouldering incense. They move with the grace of those who have seen countless dry seasons come and go. Their soft ululations, a counterpoint to the Rubdun's silent artistry. Young warriors follow, their spears glinting in the growing light. They stand tall and proud, but their eyes betray their anxiety as they scan the horizon, not for the approach of enemies, but for the gathering of clouds that might herald salvation or doom. And there, half hidden in shadow, stands the Sultan's advisor. His keen gaze misses nothing, weighing each action, each symbol drawn in the dust, for he knows that the fate of the kingdom may well rest upon this moment, this ritual, this man who dares to call the rain. Let's pause here for a moment. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the stars. The Rubdun rises, his work complete. The symbols etched into the earth seem to pulse with a life of their own. Each line and curve a testament to ancient knowledge passed down through generations. He stands still for a moment, gathering himself, preparing for what is to come. And then he begins. It is not a performance, not in any sense that we might understand. It is an entering, a merging with something vast and unknowable. His body moves, as if caught in a wind that only he can feel, swaying like the grasses that once covered these now barren plains. From his lips pour forth sounds that are at once familiar and utterly alien. It is a language older than memory, each syllable resonating with the power of countless ancestors who have stood where he now stands, who have called to the skies as he now calls. His feet stir the dust, leaving intricate patterns that mirror the symbols drawn upon the ground. Sometimes he weeps, overcome by emotions too profound for words. Sometimes he falls, his body racked by forces unseen. But always, always, he rises again, his arms stretched wide, his face turned upward to the vast expanse of sky. And when at last he falls silent, the world seems to hold its breath. Days pass, each one a test of faith, each one a crucible in which hope is forged or shattered. The people watch the skies with desperate intensity, searching for any sign that their prayers have been heard, that their sacrifices have been accepted. If the rains come, if the blessed rains come, then the Rubdun is exalted, lifted high upon the shoulders of a grateful people. He is fed the choicest cuts of meat, presented with gifts of gold and livestock. Some say that even the Sultan himself has been known to offer a daughter in marriage to a particularly powerful rainmaker. But if the skies remain unyielding, if the sun continues to beat down upon the parched earth without mercy, then the whispers begin, soft at first, but growing in volume and venom with each passing day. His heart is not pure, they say, eyes narrowed in suspicion. He did not fast long enough. Others mutter, shaking their heads in disappointment. I saw him. A voice hisses in the marketplace, eating fish from the forbidden coast. He has angered the spirits, and so faith turns to suspicion. Suspicion to fear. For in a land where life hangs by the slenderest of threads, where each drop of water is more precious than gold, fear is a currency more potent than any other. The Rubdun knows this. He feels the weight of their expectations, their hopes, their growing anger. He understands, perhaps better than any other, the precarious nature of his position, for he walks a path between worlds, balancing upon the knife's edge between reverence and retribution. Let's pause here for a moment. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the stars. As our tale draws to a close, we are left to ponder the fate of the Rubdun, the rain seeker. Will the skies open, bringing life-giving water to a thirsty land, or will the drought persist, turning hope to ash and faith to bitter recrimination? In the end, perhaps it matters not, for the true power of the Rubdun lies not in his ability to bring rain, but in the hope he represents. In a world of uncertainty and hardship, he stands as a bridge between the mortal and the divine, a living reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always the possibility of renewal, of rebirth, of rain. And so, As we drift off to sleep beneath the vast canopy of stars, let us carry with us the image of the Rubdun, arms outstretched, face turned to the heavens. Let us remember that in each of us lies the potential to be a rainmaker, to bring hope and life to the barren places of our world. For, in the end, are we not all seekers of rain, in one form or another? The sky is not just sky. In Hara and the sunburnt lowlands of the Somali, the sky was a mirror of justice, a divine report card of who had pleased the heavens, ... and who had failed. So when the clouds refused to gather, the village mood shifted like an incoming sandstorm. The market quieted. Children stopped asking questions. Even the cattle, restless in their thirst, became more than animals. They became reminders. Every dry udder, every bleating calf, every cracked water bowl echoed the same silent question. Where is the rain? And that question always circled back to one man, the Rainmaker. At first, the community made offerings. They brought baskets of incense, honey, a few coins tucked in goatskin pouches. A desperate widow once offered her wedding beads, but when the rains still refused to fall, hope turned bitter. He has lost his gift, the elders murmured. The spirits are offended, whispered the young women as they fetched water from ever-deepening wells. He should have never married that Christian woman, muttered a passing merchant. Soon, the Sultan's court would take notice. This was no small matter. The Sultan himself relied on the reputation of his rainmaker. Good harvests kept the people loyal, kept taxes paid, kept rival clans at bay. If the sky remained dry for too long, it was not just about food. It was about power, and so the blame began. At first, a quiet dismissal. The rainmaker would be summoned privately, his feet washed in silence, and offered one final chance. Go again to the sacred fig. Do not return until the sky has spoken. Sometimes he did return. Sometimes he didn't. Let's pause here for a moment. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the stars. The punishments, though rarely public, were brutal in their quiet. Some rainmakers were exiled to the salt flats. Others were ordered to sit atop barren hills, wrapped in nothing but animal skins, until the sky changed. One was buried waist-deep for 3 days, to remind the spirits that we are still part of the earth. But the worst punishment of all was memory. His name would be erased from prayers. No one would speak of him. His hut burned, his tools scattered to the winds. The people would act as if he never existed, because to speak of a failed rainmaker was to invite drought into the future. Let's pause here for a moment. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the stars. And so the next rainmaker would be chosen, ... Always younger, always quieter, trained in secret by those who survived long enough to whisper the ways of spirals and soil, thunder chants, and fasting rules. But every new rainmaker knew the truth. If he succeeded, he would be revered. If he failed, he would be forgotten. Not every throne is made of gold. Some are made of clouds, and they vanish with the wind. Let's pause here for a moment. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the stars. In the heart of the village, where the dust settled thick on empty water jugs, a young boy watched. His eyes, wide with wonder and fear, followed the retreating figure of the rainmaker. The man's shoulders, once proud, now slumped under the weight of a cloudless sky. The boy's mother pulled him close, her whisper barely audible above the dry wind. Remember this day, child, for the gift of rain is also a burden. And so the cycle continued, as old as the earth itself. The dance between hope and despair, between reverence and exile, played out beneath an unforgiving sun in the Sultan's palace. Behind ornate screens and hushed voices, plans were already in motion. The court astrologer, his fingers stained with ink from celestial charts, spoke of omens and portents. The chief advisor, a man whose ambition was as vast as the desert itself, saw opportunity in the drought. "Perhaps," he murmured to the Sultan, "it is time for a change." The Sultan, his face etched with the lines of worry, nodded slowly. Power, like water, was a precious resource, and in times of scarcity, hard choices had to be made. Outside the palace walls, life struggled on. Women walked further each day, their water pots balanced precariously on their heads, returning with less and less. Children no longer played in the dusty streets, their laughter replaced by the rasping coughs of thirst. And still, the sky remained empty. In the night, when even the insects fell silent in the oppressive heat, whispers began. Old stories, passed down through generations, of rainmakers who had faced such trials before, of those who had triumphed against impossible odds, and those who had been swallowed by the desert, never to be seen again. Some spoke of a rainmaker from long ago, whose power was so great that he could summon storms with a single word, but his pride grew too vast, and the spirits struck him down, cursing the land for 7 generations. Others told of a woman, veiled in mystery, who could read the language of clouds. She vanished one day, they said, becoming one with the mist itself. These tales, woven into the fabric of village life, served as both warning and inspiration. They reminded the people that the path of a rainmaker was never easy, never certain. As dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of fire, the village held its breath. Would this be the day? Would the clouds finally gather, heavy with the promise of life-giving rain? The rainmaker emerged from his hut, his eyes sunken from nights of sleepless ritual. In his hands, he clutched sacred objects. A feather from a bird that only flies before storms. A stone smoothed by ancient rivers, a handful of soil from the first field ever planted in this land. He began his dance, slow and deliberate. His feet traced patterns in the dust, each step a prayer, each gesture an invocation to powers beyond mortal understanding. The village watched, hope warring with doubt in their hearts. Children peeked from behind their mothers' skirts, elders leaned heavily on their staffs, merchants paused in their haggling. All eyes turned to the sky. For a moment, a fleeting instant that seemed to stretch into eternity, a shadow passed overhead. Was it a cloud? A sign? A mere trick of the light? The rainmaker's movements grew more frenzied, his chants rising in pitch and urgency. Sweat poured down his face, mingling with tears of desperation. And then, ... nothing. The shadow passed. The sky remained a relentless, unbroken blue. A collective sigh, heavy with disappointment, rippled through the crowd. The rainmaker fell to his knees, his body racked with silent sobs. In that moment, the fate of a man, a village, and perhaps an entire kingdom hung in the balance. Would mercy prevail, or would the harsh logic of survival demand its price? The Sultan's messenger appeared at the edge of the gathering, his face an impassive mask. With a gesture, he summoned the rainmaker. As the failed rainmaker was led away, his steps faltering in the shifting sand, the village held its breath once more. Not for rain this time, but for the judgment that would surely follow in the shadows. The boy who had watched it all unfold felt something stir within him. A calling, perhaps, or a curse, only time would tell. For in this land, where the sky held sway over life and death, power and faith, the role of rainmaker was both a blessing and a burden. A delicate dance between earth and sky, hope and despair, reverence and exile. And as the sun continued its merciless journey across the heavens, the people of Hara and the Somali lowlands turned their faces once more to the empty blue expanse above, waiting, hoping, praying for the clouds that refuse to come. Let's pause here for a moment. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the stars. In the silence that follows, we are left to ponder the weight of faith, the cost of failure, and the enduring human spirit that continues to look skyward, even in the darkest of droughts. For in this harsh and beautiful land, the sky is not just sky, it is the canvas upon which the story of a people is written, one raindrop or its absence at a time. There was always a fig tree. Not just any tree, mind you, it had to be that fig. The one whose roots held stories in them, gnarled, hollow in parts, older than the city walls, older, some say, than Islam in the region. It stood at the edge of the valley like a sentinel where goats refused to bleat and hawks never circled. And at its base was where the rainmakers prayed. This was not a place for crowds. No drumming, no fire, just silence, fasting, and the low hum of chants spoken in languages that no longer existed in markets or courts. The air here was thick with mystery, heavy with the weight of ancient rituals passed down through generations. Here, the rituals began long before a single drop of rain. The rainmaker would lie face down on the earth, arms outstretched, whispering to the stones. He would fast for 3 days, sipping only from a bowl filled with dew gathered at dawn. He might draw circles in charcoal on the bark, burn wild frankincense, or sing the Hear, an ancient rain call song, forbidden to be written down, and then he would wait. Rainmaking was not just science. It was theater, politics, faith, pressure. It was a delicate dance between the seen and unseen, a negotiation with forces beyond mortal comprehension. The rainmaker's art was one of interpretation and intuition, decoding the subtle language of nature itself. It was understanding which clouds came from the sea and which ones lied, which winds meant sorrow and which meant promise. It was decoding goat behavior, owl sightings, and whether your grandmother dreamed of fish. Every sign, every whisper of the natural world held meaning for those who knew how to listen. In this part of the Horn, science wore a veil, and that veil was mysticism. The line between knowledge and magic blurred, creating a realm where wisdom and wonder intertwine. The Rainmaker stood at this intersection, a bridge between the earthly and the divine. Let's pause here for a moment. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the stars. But secrecy, too, was part of the ritual. The sacred act of communing with the sky spirit was not for prying eyes or idle curiosity. It was a solitary endeavor, shrouded in silence and shadow. No one was allowed to watch, not even the Sultan's messengers. If seen, the ritual failed, and worse, the spirits were said to reverse the request. The consequences of such a transgression could be dire, rippling out to affect not just the Rainmaker, but the entire community. One Rainmaker, in the year of the blue locusts, was caught mid-prayer by a curious child. That very night, a flash flood destroyed 3 farmlands downstream. The child lived, but was mute forever after. At least, that's what the grandmothers told. Such stories served as both warning and reminder of the power held within these ancient practices. Rain, you see, is power, and power never flows freely. In a land where water meant life itself, the ability to call forth the rains was a gift beyond measure. It was a responsibility that weighed heavily on those chosen to bear it. So while the fig tree shrine appeared quiet to the outsider, it was, in truth, a battlefield, fought not with swords, but with submission. Here, beneath the gnarled branches and whispering leaves, a silent war was waged against drought and despair, a battle where the warrior's greatest weapon was humility, for to call the rains, one must first humble oneself before the vastness of the sky. The Rainmaker did not command, he did not demand. He offered himself as a vessel for nature's will. And when, finally, the rain did fall, the Rainmaker would not return immediately. He would wait until the third day. By then, the valley would be celebrating. Drums, dancing, wet footprints in the dust. The air would be alive with joy and relief, the parched earth drinking deeply of the long-awaited gift. And then, like a shadow returning from the wilderness, he'd arrive, soaked in silence. His return was not marked by fanfare or acclaim. The Rainmaker did not seek glory or recognition for his deeds. No one cheered, but every eye would watch as he walked past, not as a man, but as someone who had spoken with the sky and survived. In his quiet steps, they saw the echo of ancient power, the whisper of secrets known only to those who dared to dance with the storm. Let's pause here for a moment. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the stars. The fig tree stood witness to it all. Season after season, year after year, its branches reaching towards the heavens. Even as its roots delved deep into the earth, it was more than just a tree. It was a living archive of countless rituals, prayers, and miracles. In the hollows of its trunk, one might find traces of offerings left by generations past, fragments of pottery, weathered coins, strands of hair tied with red thread, each a silent testament to the hopes and fears of those who came before. The bark, scarred and weathered, bore the marks of countless rituals. Circles and spirals etched in charcoal, faded but still visible to those who knew where to look. Each symbol a key to unlock the mysteries of the sky, a language written in shadow and light. At night, when the moon hung low and full, the fig tree seemed to whisper. Those brave enough to listen might hear fragments of ancient chants, carried on the wind from times long past. The voices of rainmakers long gone, their legacy living on in the rustling leaves. But the tree was more than just a conduit for the past. It was a living, breathing part of the ritual itself. Its roots, reaching deep into the earth, were said to touch the very veins of the world. Through them flowed the lifeblood of the land, connecting the Rainmaker to the hidden rhythms of nature. The leaves, too, played their part. In the days leading up to a ritual, the Rainmaker would watch them closely, the way they trembled in the breeze, the patterns of dew that gathered on their surface. Each detail a clue to the mood of the sky, and when the time came for the rain call to begin, it was the fig tree that provided the first offering, a single leaf plucked with reverence and placed upon the tongue. Its bitter taste was a reminder of the sacrifice required, the price to be paid for the gift of rain. As the ritual progressed, the tree seemed to come alive. Its branches would sway even on the stillest of nights. Shadows danced among its leaves, taking on shapes that spoke of other worlds. To stand beneath its canopy was to stand at the threshold of the unknown. But for all its power and mystery, the fig tree was not infallible. There were times when even its ancient magic seemed to falter. Years when the rains refused to come, no matter how fervently the Rainmaker prayed. In those dark times, the tree became a symbol of hope. People would come from miles around to touch its trunk, to whisper their own prayers into its bark. They believed that even if the Rainmaker's voice went unheard, surely the fig tree, older than memory itself, would be able to reach the ears of the sky. And perhaps, in its own way, it did. For even in the driest of seasons, life clung to its branches. Birds nested in its crown. Insects found shelter in its hollows. It was a reminder that even in the harshest of times, life found a way to endure. As we sit here now, beneath the vast expanse of stars, we can almost feel the presence of that ancient fig tree, its roots reaching through time, connecting us to countless generations who have sat just as we do now, listening to the stories of rain and ritual. The fire flickers, casting dancing shadows that remind us of the mysteries that still linger in the world, of the power that resides in silence, in patience, in the humble act of asking rather than demanding. And as we prepare to continue our journey, we carry with us the wisdom of the fig tree shrine, a reminder that sometimes the most profound changes come not from grand gestures or loud proclamations, but from quiet moments of connection with the earth, with the sky, and with the timeless rhythms of nature itself. Let us rest here a while longer, beneath the canopy of stars. Tomorrow, we will continue our exploration of the hidden histories and sacred spaces that shape our world. But for now, let us simply listen to the whisper of the wind, to the crackle of the fire, and to the echoes of ancient songs carried on the night air. Welcome back, traveler. Tonight, let us walk slowly through Harar's stone gates, past merchants in indigo robes, past the call to prayer, echoing through narrow alleys, past the scent of kawa spiced with cardamom. This was a city like no other, tucked within the Somali highlands. It stood proud and walled, ancient and self-assured, and at its helm, Sultan Yusuf ibn Muhammad, a man of scrolls and swords, of silence and strategy. He ruled not from a gilded throne, but from a carved wooden chair near the great mosque, surrounded by books older than his bloodline. His was a mind sharpened by Islamic jurisprudence and softened by Sufi poetry. In the soft lamplight of his palace room, the air heavy with the scent of incense and aged parchment, Sultan Yusuf would sit for hours, his fingers tracing the delicate calligraphy of ancient texts. But make no mistake, this was no peaceful retirement of the soul. Sultan Yusuf's horror was caught in a storm of alliances and betrayals. To the west, the Ethiopian emperors eyed the Sultanate like a lion watching a wounded gazelle. To the south, Oromo clans pushed closer, both allies and rivals. And to the east, the coastal ports shifted under Ottoman influence and Indian merchant tides. The weight of empires pressed upon Harar's walls, each seeking to claim this jewel of the highlands for their own. Yet within those walls, life continued its rhythmic dance. The markets bustled with the chatter of 100 tongues, spices from distant lands mingling with the earthy scent of coffee beans. Children played in courtyards, while elders debated philosophy in shaded corners. Yusuf navigated it all, not by conquering, but by listening. He made marriage alliances with Oromo nobility, their colorful wedding processions winding through Harar's labyrinthine streets. He offered patronage to Muslim scholars fleeing the Highland Wars, their whispered prayers adding new melodies to the city's spiritual symphony. And he opened Harar's gates to traders from Zanzibar, Yemen, and even India, their exotic wares and tailis enriching the city's coffers and imaginations alike. But diplomacy here was a tightrope stretched above ancient grudges. One misstep, and rainmakers weren't the only ones blamed when the winds turned. The Sultan knew that each decision, each carefully chosen word, could tip the delicate balance he had worked so hard to maintain. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the city slept and only the stars bore witness, Yusuf would pace the palace rooftops, weighing the fates of his people against the ambitions of empires. Let's pause here for a moment. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the stars. Picture Sultan Yusuf, noble in his flowing robes, standing at a balcony overlooking his beloved Harar. In one hand, he holds a scroll, perhaps a treaty, or a poem, or a letter from a distant ruler. His eyes scan the city rooftops, then lift to the distant hills where unseen forces gather. The weight of responsibility etches lines upon his brow, yet there is a fire in his gaze that speaks of unwavering resolve. He once invited a Christian emissary from Gondor, a bold move, considering Harar's deeply Islamic identity. Many whispered that the Sultan was betraying the city's faith, but Yusuf knew better. He wasn't opening the door to friendship. He was showing strength through hospitality. As the emissary entered the city, tension crackled through the air like heat lightning. Merchants closed their stalls. Mothers hurried children indoors, and the ulama muttered dark prophecies. Yet Yusuf received his guest with all the grace and splendor befitting Harar's reputation. Silk carpets were laid out, incense burned in golden censers, and the finest delicacies of the region were presented on gleaming platters. They say, during that tense meeting, he quoted both the Quran and the Psalms, not to flatter, but to remind. We all fear the drought, we all plant in faith. The emissary's eyes widened, recognizing the wisdom in Yusuf's words. For in this land, where rain was life and drought was death, faith transcended the boundaries of creed. Power in Hara didn't just come from swords or rainfall. It came from knowing when to speak and when to sip tea in silence. And that is what made Sultan Yusuf so dangerous, and so respected. In the intricate dance of diplomacy, he was a master of the unspoken word, the meaningful pause, the subtle gesture that could convey volumes. Let us now ascend to a rooftop, as the late afternoon sun bathes horror in golden light. Here Sultan Yusuf sits with Oromo elders, their weathered faces etched with the stories of 100 seasons. Steam rises from delicate cups of spiced tea, carrying with it the aroma of cardamom and clove. No words are spoken for long moments as they gaze out over the city walls to the vast expanse beyond. In this silence, alliances are forged and strengthened. The Oromo, fierce and proud, recognize in Yusuf a leader who respects their ways while offering the protection of Harar's ancient walls. And Yusuf, ever the strategist, sees in these nomadic warriors a buffer against the encroaching Ethiopian Empire. As the sun dips lower, painting the sky in hues of amber and rose, conversation flows as smoothly as the tea. They speak of rain and grazing lands, of trade routes and shared enemies. But beneath it all runs an undercurrent of mutual understanding, a recognition that in this harsh and beautiful land, survival depends on cooperation. Let's pause here for a moment. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the stars. Night falls over Hara, and the city transforms. Lanterns flicker to life in narrow alleyways, casting dancing shadows on whitewashed walls. The muezzin's call to prayer floats on the cooling air, a reminder of the faith that binds this community together. And in his private chambers, Sultan Yusuf kneels upon his prayer rug, seeking guidance for the challenges that lie ahead. For even as he weaves his web of alliances and negotiations, storm clouds gather on the horizon. The Ethiopian emperor grows restless, eyeing Harar's wealth and strategic position with increasing hunger. Ottoman influence creeps along the coast like a rising tide, threatening to sweep away the delicate balance of power. And within the city itself, there are those who whisper that Yusuf's diplomacy is weakness, that only the sword can protect Harar's independence. But the Sultan remains steadfast in his vision. He knows that Harar's strength lies not in its walls or its warriors, but in its ability to adapt and endure. Like the desert flower that blooms after the briefest rain, this city has weathered countless storms throughout its long history, and under Yusuf's careful stewardship, it will continue to thrive. As dawn breaks over the eastern hills, painting the sky in shades of hope, Sultan Yusuf rises to face another day of delicate negotiations and weighty decisions. He dons his robes of office, each fold and drape a symbol of the responsibility he bears. With a final glance at the ancient texts that have guided him thus far, he steps out to greet his people, for in the end, it is not empires or armies that will determine Harar's fate. It is the wisdom of its leader, the resilience of its people, and the enduring spirit of a city that has always stood at the crossroads of cultures and faiths. And as long as men like Sultan Yusuf Ibn Muhammad guide its course, Harar will remain a beacon of hope in a turbulent world. Let us leave him now, traveler, as he walks the winding streets of his beloved city. The scent of incense and coffee mingles with the morning air, and the first rays of sunlight glint off the polished domes of 100 mosques. Harar awakens, ready to face whatever challenges the new day may bring, secure in the knowledge that its sultan watches over all with a steady hand and a compassionate heart. And so, our tale of Sultan Yusuf draws to a close, but the story of Harar, this jewel of the highlands, this crossroads of empires, continues on, eternal as the stars that watch over its slumbering walls. Far beyond the gates of Harar, past the last market stalls and the thick stone walls, the land opened into silence. Thorny acacia trees swaying, goat bells tinkling, and the smell of dry grass carried by the wind. This was Oromo land, and for Sultan Yusuf, it was not an enemy's territory. It was a negotiation table without a roof. The Oromo were not a single people, but a constellation of clans, each with their own Garda system. A complex socio-political code passed down orally, where leadership rotated age sets were honored, and peace was as ceremonial as war. Yusuf knew he couldn't conquer such a system, so he sat with it. In the shade of an ancient fig tree, Oromo elders gathered in a circle, their weathered faces etched with the wisdom of generations. One space remained empty, awaiting the arrival of Sultan Yusuf or his emissary. The hills rolled gently in the background, while cattle grazed peacefully in the midground, oblivious to the weight of history unfolding before them. They say the Sultan didn't just send he walked barefoot on those same goat paths, his royal robes gathering dust from the earth that held the secrets of countless seasons. He shared milk and injera by the fire, the warmth of hospitality melting away the barriers of language and culture. Yusuf listened intently to praise poems sung in Afan Oromo, the lilting melodies carrying stories of bravery and honor across the ages, and when he spoke, he did unti speak as a conqueror. He spoke as a neighbor who knew drought could visit anyone's doorstep. His words were like water, nourishing the parched soil of mistrust that had long divided their peoples. One elder, his eyes clouded with cataracts but bright with memory, recalled the Sultan's words. Rain doesn't fall on Muslim or Oromo alone. It falls where hearts are open. That line would be repeated in songs for a generation, carried on the wind like seeds of hope, taking root in the hearts of both Harari and Oromo alike. As twilight painted the sky in hues of lavender and gold, hands met in the flickering firelight near a gurgling riverbed. Symbolic gifts were exchanged, strings of vibrant beads, representing the bonds of friendship, a proud, healthy calf, a promise of shared prosperity, and a carefully rolled scroll, the written word bridging oral traditions. In one of the most pivotal agreements of the era, Sultan Yusuf secured seasonal passage right through Oromo territory for Harari caravans. But in return, he didn't just offer gold or grain. He offered something far more precious in this land, where the whims of nature held sway over life and death. He offered drought insurance. If a particular Oromo clan's crops failed, withering under the merciless sun, Harar would open its storehouses. Surplus grain would flow like a lifeline across the parched landscape. In return, The clan would pledge to protect Harari traders from raids during migration, ensuring that commerce and culture could continue to flourish, even in the harshest of times. It was diplomacy rooted in weather, a foreign policy of rainfall. Sultan Yusuf understood that in this unforgiving land, alliances forged in times of plenty were tested and strengthened in times of scarcity. He was weaving a tapestry of interdependence, each thread carefully chosen to withstand the storms of conflict and the droughts of mistrust. But not everyone in Hara supported these moves. Within the city walls, whispers of dissent began to circulate like smoke through narrow alleyways. There were merchants who muttered darkly that Yusuf was selling out the city to nomads, trading away Hara's proud heritage for a handful of promises. Some clerics, their fingers stained with ink from ancient texts, feared that Oromo influence would dilute Islamic scholarship, introducing foreign ideas that might challenge centuries of tradition. Yet Yusuf remained steady, like a baobab tree weathering countless seasons. "A fortress can protect from men," he said once, his voice carrying the weight of hard-won wisdom, but not from hunger. He wasn't just building alliances, he was building climate resilience. In a time when that term didn't yet exist, Yusuf saw beyond the immediate horizon, envisioning a future where the prosperity of Hara and the Oromo were inextricably linked, rising and falling like the chest of a sleeping giant. As dawn broke over the misty hills, a scene unfolded that would have been unthinkable just a few seasons prior. Oromo warriors, their spears glinting in the early light, rode slowly alongside Harari traders. The traders' camels swayed beneath loads of precious goods, spices, textiles, and the promise of shared wealth. Children from both communities watched wide-eyed from the sidelines. Oromo and Harari alike, in their innocent gaze, lay the seeds of a future where old enmities might fade like morning dew, replaced by the bonds of shared experience and mutual respect. And so, the Rainmaker and the Sultan shared something deeper than power. They both made promises to nature, and hoped it would listen. Their pacts were not just written on parchment or sealed with royal signet rings. They were etched into the very land itself, in the furrows of newly ploughed fields, in the paths worn smooth by the hooves of traded cattle, in the laughter of children playing games that borrowed words from both languages. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the landscape, Sultan Yusuf gazed out over the rolling hills. He saw not just grazing lands and potential trade routes, but a shared future taking root in the fertile soil of understanding. The wind whispered through the acacia trees, carrying with it the faint echoes of Oromo songs and the call to prayer from distant Harari. In that moment, it seemed as if the very air itself was weaving these two peoples together, strand by strand, creating a tapestry strong enough to withstand whatever storms the future might bring. Yusuf knew that the path ahead would not be easy. Old grudges die hard, and the temptation to retreat behind high walls in times of hardship would always be present. But he also knew that the seeds of cooperation he had planted would grow, nourished by the shared hopes and fears of people who, at their core, wanted the same things: safety, prosperity, and a future for their children. As the Sultan turned back towards Hara, the city's walls gleaming like a mirage in the distance, he carried with him the weight of promises made and the hope of promises yet to be fulfilled. He walked not as a conqueror returning triumphant, but as a man who had glimpsed a vision of what could be, if only hearts remained as open as the vast African sky above. The journey back to Hara was more than just a physical trek across sun-baked earth. It was a pilgrimage of the spirit, each step bringing two worlds closer together. Sultan Yusuf knew that the true test of his diplomacy would come not in grand gestures or flowery speeches, but in the day-to-day realities of life on the edge of the desert. Would Harari traders treat their Oromo guides with respect when far from watchful eyes? Would Oromo clans honor their pledges when drought withered their own crops? These were the questions that would determine whether Yusuf's vision of a shared future would take root or wither, like so many failed harvests before. As the Sultan passed through Harar's gates, the familiar sounds and scents of the city enveloping him, he knew that his work was far from over. The whispers of discontent would need to be addressed, fears allayed, and the benefits of this new alliance made clear to even the most skeptical of his subjects. But for now, as the call to prayer echoed through Harar's winding streets, Sultan Yusuf allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. He had taken the first steps on a long and uncertain path, guided by a vision of a future where the rains of prosperity would fall on all, regardless of clan or creed, and in the hearts of both Harari and Oromo, a small seed of hope had been planted. A seed that, with care and nurturing, might one day grow into a mighty tree, offering shade and sustenance to generations yet unborn. Rain, in the Horn of Africa, wasn't just weather. It was a covenant. It was a verdict from the sky, a whispered reply to the calls of earthbound mortals. And when the earth cracked and the wells sank dry, the people turned not to the sky in despair, but to the ritual, to the Rainmaker. In the golden light of dawn, a woman draped in a flowing white shawl kneels before a ring of charcoal. The ground beneath her is parched and cracked, a testament to the unforgiving drought that has gripped the land. Around her, silent villagers gather, their eyes filled with hope and trepidation. Dust hangs suspended in the air, as if time itself has paused to witness this ancient rite. These rituals were neither wholly Islamic nor entirely pagan. They were a tapestry woven from the threads of pre-Islamic oral law, Sufi metaphysics, ancient Cushitic cosmology, and clan-specific interpretations of divine order. In this land where the veil between worlds seemed thin, the Rainmaker stood as a bridge between the earthly and the divine. Each ritual began not with sound, but silence. The Rainmaker would walk into an open clearing at dawn, barefoot, unspeaking, having fasted for days. Her body was a vessel, emptied of worldly concerns, ready to be filled with the whispers of spirits and ancestors. A circle of charcoal would be drawn around a small mound of millet or barley, symbolizing the fertility of the earth waiting to be blessed. This sacred geometry connected the mundane to the mystical, a doorway through which blessings might flow. Then came the danto, a slow chant, breathy and deep, almost like a hum. But this wasn't for the people, it was for the spirits of wind, for the ancestors buried in parched graves, for whatever deity or jinn might carry word to the clouds. The Rainmaker's voice rose and fell like the tide, each syllable a drop of sound in an ocean of silence. Across a desert plateau, dancers in blue robes move in slow, hypnotic rhythm. Their faces are painted with ash and ochre, eyes closed in trance. They are not performers, but conduits, their bodies translating the Rainmaker's chant into a language the very earth could understand. The air shimmers with the weight of their devotion, each step a prayer pressed into the thirsty soil. It wasn't uncommon for the Rainmaker to weep openly mid-ritual, not from fear, but responsibility. Because this wasn't theater, this was life and death. Hope and desperation distilled into gesture and song. If the rains did not come within days or weeks, the people might return, not with prayer, but with fury. The burden of an entire community's survival rested on her shoulders, heavier than any crown. And so, these rituals carried a second layer of mysticism to guard the sacredness of the process. Multiple versions of the rituals were deliberately taught with errors, decoys passed through generations to mislead outsiders or power-hungry imitators. Only a few elders held the unbroken chain of the true verses and gestures. This secrecy was not born of greed, but of reverence. A recognition that some knowledge was too potent, too sacred to be carelessly shared. There are tales of sacred songs sung only once every 7 years, their melodies carried on the wind to be caught by the ears of those deemed worthy. Of secret riverbeds where charcoal must be ground, the whisper of ancient waters lingering in the ash, of goats painted in red ochre and released to wander until they stopped. That spot marked by invisible forces as the ground where heaven and earth might meet. One ritual known as Durban Biaha required a bowl of spring water to be placed under moonlight, left untouched for 3 nights. If a single ripple appeared on the 3rd night, it meant the prayer had reached the heavens, that the celestial council had heard the pleas of the earthbound. The water became a mirror, reflecting not just the moon, but the very face of hope. But if not, then it meant the clouds were still in council, or worse, that a rival clan's Rainmaker had blocked the blessing with their own magic. For in this realm of spirit and survival, even the sky could become a battlefield. Rainmakers were not just priests, but warriors, their weapons made of song and symbol, fighting for the very breath of their people. Dark clouds gather over the Horn of Africa, pregnant with promise and peril. Symbols are drawn in sand, intricate and meaningful, only to be erased by the relentless wind. This cycle of creation and destruction, of hope written and mirrors the eternal dance between drought and abundance that has shaped this land for millennia. In a region caught between science and spirit, empire and famine, these rituals weren't superstition. They were survival. They were memory encoded in metaphor. A way for the powerless to speak to power, and sometimes to win. Each gesture, each whispered word, was a thread in a vast tapestry of resilience that stretched back through time. The Rainmaker didn't just call for water. She called upon the strength of ancestors, the wisdom of the land, the very spirit of endurance that allowed life to flourish in this harsh and beautiful place. As the ritual reaches its crescendo, the air seems to thicken with possibility. The villagers, who have stood in respectful silence, begin to sway gently, their bodies unconsciously echoing the rhythms of the Donto. Children peer from behind their mothers' skirts, wide-eyed at the spectacle that holds the promise of life itself. The Rainmaker raises her arms to the sky, her voice rising in a final, plaintive call. It is a sound that carries the weight of generations, of countless droughts endured and overcome. In this moment, she is not just one woman. She is the voice of the land itself, crying out for renewal. As her chant fades, a hush falls over the gathering. Eyes turn skyward, searching for any sign that their pleas have been heard. The wait begins. A time of tension and hope, where every cloud on the horizon becomes a harbinger of possibility. In the days that follow, the village holds its breath. Children are sent to check the Durban Biaha bowl each dawn, searching for that telltale ripple. Elders scan the sky with eyes made wise by years of watching for rain. The air becomes heavy with anticipation, as if the very atmosphere has absorbed the weight of their collective yearning. A shift in the wind, the scent of moisture carried from distant lands, a darkening on the horizon that speaks not of dust, but of blessed clouds. When the first drops fall, they are received not with shouts, but with a reverent silence. For this is not just rain, it is redemption, renewal, the fulfillment of an ancient promise between earth and sky. As the land drinks deeply, the Rainmaker stands alone, her work complete. There is no fanfare, no celebration in her honor, for she knows that this blessing is not of her making. She is merely the conduit, the humble servant of forces far greater than herself. Her reward is in the greening of the earth, in the laughter of children splashing in newly formed puddles, in the knowledge that life will continue, yet even as the community rejoices, she must remain vigilant. For the cycle of drought and rain is eternal, and the need for her wisdom will come again. She will pass on her knowledge, carefully and selectively, ensuring that this sacred tradition endures for generations to come. In the Horn of Africa, rain is more than weather. It is the lifeblood of a people, a testament to the enduring power of faith and the indomitable spirit of those who call this harsh land home. The rituals of the Rainmaker stand as a bridge between past and future, a reminder that, in the face of nature's might, humanity's greatest strength lies not in dominion, but in harmony. As the rains fall, washing clean the dust of drought, the land whispers its gratitude, and in villages across the Horn, people look to the sky with renewed wonder, knowing that sometimes, when all seems lost, a song can summon miracles. They said when the earth cracked open with thirst, it was the warrior or the merchant who held power. It was the one who could speak to the sky. In quiet valleys, where dry winds sweep through camel thorn trees, the rainmakers of old didn't shout their knowledge. They moved like shadows between belief and survival. Not priests, not witches, but something in between. Guardians of signs, readers of silence. The ancient art of rainmaking, passed down through generations, was a delicate dance between the earthly and the divine. These practitioners, revered and feared in equal measure, held the key to life itself in lands where water was as precious as gold. Their methods were shrouded in mystery, their rituals a closely guarded secret known only to those chosen to carry the burden of this sacred responsibility. Before the first ritual, they fasted for days, not as punishment, but as purification, their bodies emptied like a dry riverbed preparing for the flood. Only then would they draw the sacred signs. Circles traced in charcoal, patterns pressed into sand, lines pointing toward the heavens, each one encoded with meaning older than memory. The Rainmaker's preparations were as much a part of the rituals as the ceremony itself. As they abstained from food and drink, their physical hunger grew, mirroring the thirst of the parched earth around them. This sacrifice was not mere symbolism. It was a necessary step in attuning themselves to the rhythms of nature, to become empty vessels ready to channel the power of the sky. With bodies weakened but spirits strengthened, they would begin the intricate process of creating the sacred symbols. Each mark made in the sand or traced with ash held significance beyond mortal understanding. These were not random designs, but a complex language spoken only between the earth and the heavens. Circles represented the eternal cycle of life and death, of drought and abundance. Spirals mimicked the wind patterns that brought rain-laden clouds. Zigzag lines echoed the path of lightning, a force that could both destroy and bring life-giving water. Every symbol was a prayer, a plea, and a promise all at once. There were songs too, not sung aloud, but hummed just beneath the breath. Songs known only to their lineage, carried across generations like heirlooms. They said if sung wrong, the clouds would ignore you. If sung with arrogance, the clouds might punish you. Only humility moved the heavens. These melodies, barely audible to human ears, were believed to resonate with the very fabric of creation. The Rainmakers understood that their role was not to command the elements, but to humbly request their cooperation. The songs were a reminder of humanity's place in the grand tapestry of existence. Small, yet significant, as the rituals progressed, the air would grow heavy with anticipation. The Rainmakers' movements became more fluid, their gestures more expansive. They danced with the wind, their bodies becoming conduits for ancient wisdom. Each step, each turn, each wave of the hand was imbued with intention and reverence. The onlookers, if there were any, would watch in heart. For many, this was a glimpse into a world beyond their understanding. A world where the boundaries between the physical and the spiritual blurred. Some might feel fear, others hope, but all recognized the gravity of the moment. As night fell, the rituals would often intensify. Under the vast canopy of stars, the Rainmaker's connection to the cosmos seemed to strengthen. They would trace constellations in the air, their fingers leaving trails of invisible light. The night sky became a canvas upon which they painted their desires for rain, for life, for renewal. Hours would pass, sometimes days. The Rainmaker's endurance was legendary, their focus unwavering. They existed in a state between worlds, their consciousness expanded beyond the confines of their mortal form. In this liminal space, they could feel the pulse of the earth, the breath of the wind, the distant rumble of thunder, and when the rain did come, after all that waiting, watching, hoping, the Rainmaker never celebrated too loudly, for in every success, the next drought was waiting. The first drops would fall softly, almost the Rainmaker would stand still, face turned upward, feeling each cool touch on their skin like a blessing. As the rain increased, a collective sigh of relief would ripple through the community. Children might laugh and dance in the downpour, while elders wept silently, overcome with gratitude. But even in this moment of triumph, the Rainmaker remained solemn. They understood better than anyone the delicate balance of nature, the cyclical nature of abundance and scarcity. Their work was never truly done, for the next challenge always loomed on the horizon. In the days that followed, as life-giving water seeped into the parched earth and new green shoots began to emerge, the Rainmaker would quietly withdraw. They needed time to recover, to replenish their own spiritual reserves. For they knew that their gift was both a blessing and a burden, one that required constant vigilance and preparation. The rains would bring renewed hope and vitality to the land, crops would flourish, animals would thrive, and the community would rejoice in the abundance. But beneath the celebrations, a current of respect and awe for the Rainmaker would always remain. They were the unsung heroes, the bridge between the mortal world and the realm of the divine. As seasons turned and years passed, the Rainmakers would continue their sacred work. Some would train up, carefully selecting those with the right combination of sensitivity, humility, and inner strength. Others would journey to distant lands, sharing their knowledge with those in need, but always they remained true to their calling. Guardians of the delicate balance between earth and sky. In time, the world around them would change. New technologies would emerge, promising control over the forces of nature. Some would scoff at the old ways, dismissing the Rainmakers as relics of a superstitious past. But those who knew, who had witnessed the power of their rituals, understood that there were some things beyond the reach of science and machinery. For in the quiet valleys, where dry winds still sweep through camel-thorn trees, the Rainmakers continue their ancient practice. They move like shadows between belief and survival. Their knowledge, a flickering flame passed from hand to hand through the ages. Not priests, not witches, but something in between. Guardians of signs, readers of silence, keepers of a wisdom as old as the earth itself. And when the earth cracks open with thirst once more, it is still not the warrior or the merchant who holds true power, but the one who can speak to the sky, who can coax life-giving water from the heavens with nothing more than faith, humility, and an understanding of the sacred rhythms that govern all existence. In Hara and its borderlands, knowledge did not always wear a turban or sit in a library. Sometimes it wore silence, wrapped in a mother's hush, guarded by an uncle's unspoken glance. Rainmaking wisdom was not written. It was remembered, carefully, like a flame carried across wind. The rainmakers didn't train in schools. They learned in the pauses between stories. In the strange places elders told children not to go. "Don't walk near that hill after sunset," they'd whisper. "Never step over those ashes by the river." They'd caution, not warnings, but veiled teachings, hidden in plain sight. In the dusty streets of Harar, where ancient walls whispered secrets of centuries past, the art of rainmaking was a sacred trust. It was a knowledge as old as the earth itself, passed down through generations like a precious heirloom. But this was no ordinary inheritance. It chose its keepers with a wisdom beyond human understanding. Sometimes it found its way to a quiet child who spoke to animals, a young girl with eyes that seemed to see beyond the visible world, her small hands gentle as she stroked the fur of a stray cat. The elders would watch, nodding silently to each other, recognizing the signs of a future rainmaker. Other times, it settled upon a widow who walked the fields before sunrise, whispering to the soil, her weathered feet leaving no trace in the parched earth, her voice a soft murmur carried on the pre-dawn breeze. The villagers would see her and know. She held the power to coax life from the reluctant sky. Never loud, never proud, always listening. These were the unspoken rules of the Rainmaker. Their power lay not in grand gestures or boastful claims, but in the quiet observation of the world around them. They were the guardians of a delicate balance, the intermediaries between earth and sky. Some said the signs of coming rain lived in the belly of a goat. The Rainmakers would watch as the animals grazed, noting the subtle changes in their behavior. A sudden stillness, a shift in the direction they faced. These were the whispers of approaching clouds. Others believed it was in the way the birds circled, their flight patterns a complex language written across the vast canvas of the sky. The Rainmakers would stand for hours, heads tilted back, reading the avian prophecies with practiced eyes. And then there were those who swore the winds held the secret. They spoke of how the air curled through a broken window, carrying with it the promise of moisture. The Rainmakers would sit in abandoned houses, feeling the breeze on their skin, listening to the stories it told of distant storms. But perhaps the most mysterious were the Rainmakers who felt it first in their own bones. A deep ache in the spine that spoke of gathering clouds, a dream of water lapping at the foot of their bed, so vivid they woke with damp feet. A peculiar cough that came only when rain was on its way, as if their bodies were attuned to the very essence of water in the air. You could not ask a Rainmaker directly about their craft. Such knowledge was not freely given, nor could it be demanded. It was a sacred trust, a responsibility that weighed heavily on those chosen to bear it. But there were signs for those who knew how to look. If you saw a Rainmaker sitting outside one morning, their gaze fixed on the western horizon, their staff planted firmly in the earth, that was the signal. Without a word spoken, the village would begin to prepare. Women would bring out clay pots, long stored away, placing them strategically to catch the precious drops. Men would inspect the channels that would guide the water to parched fields, clearing away debris and reinforcing weak spots. Children would run excited errands, their small feet kicking up dust that would soon turn to mud. Because when a custodian of the sky went still, the sky, too, paused to listen. It was a moment of breathless anticipation, a silent conversation between the earthbound prophet and the vast, unknowable heavens. In those moments, time seemed too slow. The harsh sun beat down on the waiting land. But there was a change in the air, a heaviness, a promise. The Rainmaker would sit, unmoving, as the world held its breath around them. And then, almost imperceptibly at first, it would begin a darkening on the far horizon, a subtle shift in the wind, the first tentative drops falling like blessings on the parched earth. The Rainmaker would not move, would not speak. Their work was done in silence, in stillness. They were merely the conduit, the bridge between the thirsty earth and the generous sky. As the rain fell in earnest, life would explode across the landscape. Dry riverbeds would fill, plants would unfurl their leaves, and the air would fill with the joyous cries of children playing in the downpour. But the Rainmaker would remain apart, watching, for they knew that with great power came great responsibility. The rain was life, but too much could bring destruction. It was a delicate balance, one they had spent a lifetime learning to maintain. In the days that followed, as the land drank deeply and new green pushed through the softened soil, the Rainmaker would move quietly through the village. They would not accept praise or thanks. Their gift was for all, a shared blessing that belonged to no one and everyone. Instead, they would watch, they would listen for the next sign, the next whisper from the earth or sky, always alert, always ready to interpret the subtle language of nature. For in Haranet's borderlands, the art of rainmaking was more than a skill. It was a sacred duty, a lifelong commitment to the delicate dance between earth and sky, a responsibility carried in silence, passed down through generations, preserved in the pauses between words and the spaces between breaths. And so the cycle continued, as it had for centuries. Knowledge wrapped in silence, wisdom hidden in plain sight. The Rainmakers of Haragadias, of an ancient art, keepers of a flame carried carefully across the winds of time. In the end, it was not about power or prestige. It was about service, about maintaining the delicate balance of life in a harsh and beautiful land. It was about listening to the earth, to the sky, to the whispers of ancestors long gone, for in the quiet moments, in the stillness before the storm, lay the true wisdom of the Rainmakers. A wisdom as vast as the sky, as deep as the earth, as eternal as the cycle of seasons itself. And as the rains came and went, as life bloomed and faded and bloomed again, the Rainmakers of Hara stood watch, silent, guardians of an ancient knowledge, custodians of the sky, keepers of the sacred balance between earth and heaven. In the land where the sky meets the earth, there were seasons when the rains arrived like a gentle caress, a soft whisper of forgiveness across the parched plains. The crops, once withered and weak, would stretch towards the heavens, their leaves unfurling in gratitude. Children, their laughter echoing through the village, would dance with abandon in the newly formed puddles, their small bodies glistening with droplets of joy. Even the Sultan, in all his regal splendor, would step out from beneath his gilded canopy to offer thanks to the open sky above. But not all seasons were kind. There were times when the rains refused to come, not because the ancient songs had been forgotten, their melodies lost to the winds of time, not because the sacred rituals had been neglected, their importance diminished by the rush of modern life. No, sometimes the rains stayed away simply because the sky, like a temperamental deity, had its own moods and whims. And in those dry seasons, when the earth cracked and the wells ran dry, people searched desperately for reasons. They turned their gaze to the Rainmaker, that enigmatic figure who walked the line between the mortal and the divine. Had they erred in some way? Had they broken a sacred fast, their hunger overcoming their devotion? Had they whispered the wrong verse, their tongue tripping over ancient words of power? Or perhaps the fault lay with the village itself? Had someone, in a moment of carelessness or defiance, dishonored the old ways? Had a child, innocent in their transgression, walked barefoot across a stone that should never have felt human touch? But there was a darker thought that lurked in the shadows of their minds, a whisper that grew louder as the drought stretched on. What if the rain was being held back, not by the whims of nature, but by the will of man? What if someone who possessed the knowledge to call the rains was choosing to keep the skies clear and the earth parched? For in the Sultanate, where the line between the spiritual and the political blurred like a mirage on the horizon, belief was more than just a matter of faith. It was a currency of power, as tangible as gold and just as coveted. To control the rain was to hold the very essence of life in one's hands, and power, as it has always been, was a dangerous thing to possess. A skilled rainmaker could be the savior of an entire region, their names spoken with reverence and gratitude. But that same power could be a death sentence. A rainmaker who inspired fear in the hearts of the powerful could find themselves locked away, their gifts wasted behind iron bars. One who was loved by the people might fall victim to a poisoned cup, their influence seen as a threat to those who ruled. Even the most respected among them could vanish without a trace, as if the earth itself had swallowed them whole. It seemed that even the clouds above were watchful, bearing silent witness to the intricate dance of power and survival that played out beneath them. And so, when the skies remained stubbornly clear, the rainmakers would redouble their efforts. They fasted with an intensity that bordered on madness, their bodies becoming as withered as the crops they sought to save. They sang their prayers in voices barely above a whisper, afraid that the wrong ears might hear and misinterpret their pleas. They walked through the village with a caution that bordered on paranoia, each step carefully placed as if the very ground beneath their feet might betray them. For they knew better than anyone that there were some questions to which the sky steadfastly refused to provide answers, especially when there were too many eyes watching, too many ears straining to hear secrets that were never meant to be shared. As the drought stretched on, the mood in the village grew heavy, like the thunderclouds that teased on the distant horizon, but never drew near enough to offer relief. The once bustling marketplace fell silent, the vibrant tapestry of daily life fading to muted tones of worry and resignation. In Hara, the ancient walled city that had weathered countless storms, both natural and political, the effects of the drought were etched into every sun-baked stone. The famous wells, once a source of life and community, now stood as stark reminders of nature's fickle generosity. Their depths, once filled with cool, clear water, now revealed only cracked earth and forgotten prayers. At the heart of the city, where the great mosque stood as a testament to faith and perseverance, the community gathered in silent supplication, men and women, young and old, rich and poor, all united in their desperation for rain. Their heads bowed, their hands raised in quiet pleading, they formed a living mosaic of hope against the backdrop of an unforgiving sky. Among them moved the Rainmaker, a figure both revered and feared. Their weathered hands, marked by years of ritual and toil, traced intricate symbols in the dust at their feet. Each line, each curve, was a word in a language older than memory, a plea to forces beyond mortal understanding. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of fire and blood, a change could be felt in the air. The wind, which had for so long carried only dust and disappointment, now whispered of possibility. On the horizon, dark clouds began to gather, their edges tinged with the promise of rain. But still, the Rainmaker's work was not done. For in this delicate balance of nature and politics, of faith and fear, even the most promising signs could vanish in an instant. And so they continued their silent dance, their eyes never leaving the sky, their lips moving in constant prayer. For in this land where belief held the power of life and death, where a single drop of rain could spark revolution or cement a dynasty, nothing was certain until the first raindrop fell. And even then, in the moment of triumph and relief, the Rainmaker knew that their greatest challenge was yet to come. For with the rain would come questions, and with questions would come danger. Who had called the rain? Who had held it back? Whose prayers had been answered, and whose had been ignored? In the gathering darkness, as the first distant rumble of thunder rolled across the plains, the Rainmakers stood alone. Their face, lined with the weight of their responsibility, turned upwards to meet the gaze of the sky. In that moment, suspended between drought and deluge, between faith and doubt, they whispered a final prayer. Not for rain, for that was now inevitable, but for wisdom, for strength, for the ability to navigate the treacherous waters of power, belief that would soon come flooding into their world. As the first heavy drops began to fall, splashing against parched earth and upturned faces alike, the Rainmaker allowed themselves a small smile, for they knew that while the drought had ended, their true test was only just beginning. And somewhere above, beyond the veil of clouds and mortal understanding, the sky watched and waited, holding its secrets close. We stepped through carved wooden doors into the city of Hara, once the beating heart of a sultanate where religion, scholarship, and diplomacy met behind high stone walls. As our gaze drifts slowly over Hara Jugal's ancient fortifications, a tapestry of color unfolds beneath us. Vibrant homes, their walls painted in hues that echo the richness of the city's history, nestle close together like precious gems in an ornate setting. Narrow alleyways wind between these dwellings, alive with the patter of children's feet as they dart through the labyrinthine streets, their laughter a counterpoint to the city's solemn whispers. In the early morning light, a gentle mist clings to the terraced gardens that cascade down the hillsides, veiling the city in an ethereal embrace that speaks of secrets long held and wisdom carefully guarded. By the 17th century, Hara had blossomed into far more than a mere urban center. It stood as a fortress of faith, a jewel of Islamic learning, and a place where the melodious call to prayer intertwined with the aromatic tendrils of freshly roasted coffee and the subtle, bitter notes of cot leaves. Life within these walls was a delicate dance of structure and sacredness, surprisingly opulent in its intellectual and spiritual wealth. 5 main gates stood sentinel over the city, each bearing a name steeped in legend, a story whispered through generations, and a symbolic purpose that reached far beyond its physical presence. The elders of Hara, their eyes bright with the light of ancient wisdom, spoke of how each gate watched over the city with the vigilance of one of the 5 pillars of Islam. These were not mere passageways of stone and wood, but living guardians of a sacred trust. At these gates, guards performed a duty that transcended simple security. Their eyes, sharp and discerning, did more than merely check visitors. They committed to memory the subtle nuances of faces, the intricate webs of lineage, the telltale inflections of dialects. To dwell within Hara was to inhabit a vast memory palace, its corridors lined with rituals passed down through time and trust, inherited like precious heirlooms. At the very heart of Hara's elite society stood the scholar princes, figures who defied simple categories. These were not rulers content with the trappings of power alone. They were poets whose words painted vivid landscapes of the soul. Jurists who could unravel the most complex knots of Islamic law, and patrons whose passion for Arabic calligraphy transformed mere words into works of sublime art. In their hands, manuscripts penned in flawless Ge'ez or Arabic were not just documents, but treasures more valuable than gold, passed down through generations with reverence and care. Some of these princely scholars possessed minds so capacious, so finely honed, that they could recite entire passages of Islamic jurisprudence and poetry from memory, their words flowing like honey, rich with meaning and sweet with devotion. Yet in the next breath, they might seamlessly shift tongues, their voices adapting to converse with Oromo traders in their native language, or to engage in delicate diplomacy with envoys from the Ethiopian highlands. Imagine, if you will, a single afternoon in the life of such a prince. The sun climbs high over Hara's walls as he engages in a spirited debate on the finer points of Quranic theology, his words precise, his arguments as intricate and beautiful as the city's famous basket weaving. As the shadows lengthen, he might turn his attention to more worldly matters, inspecting a caravan laden with salt bricks, his keen eye assessing quality and quantity with equal skill, and as evening approaches, by the soft glow of an oil lamp, his hand might move across parchment, crafting a love letter sealed with rosewater ink, its sentiments as delicate and fragrant as the seal itself. In the quiet corners of Hara's scholarly world, we find scenes of profound contemplation and artistic devotion. Picture a learned man bent over his work, the flickering light of a lamp casting dancing shadows across the walls. Around him, shelves groan under the weight of handwritten Qurans, each a masterpiece of calligraphy and devotion. On low tables nearby, folded letters bound with ribbon await dispatch, their contents perhaps holding the key to alliances, trade agreements, or matters of the heart. And amidst it all, the rich sense of spices being sorted filled the air, a reminder of the worldly wealth that flows through this city of the mind. Yet behind the high walls of Hara, it was often the women of the court who truly led the cultural life of the city. Their domain was one of subtle power and profound influence. In kitchens, redolent with the aroma of coffee brewed with cloves and cardamom, they passed down recipes and rituals that bound the community together. Mothers taught their daughters songs that carried the weight of history and the promise of the future in every note. Skilled hands moved across fabric, embroidering designs that would adorn the robes of diplomats and judges, each stitch a silent testament to the artistry and patience of Hara's women. And in the quiet corners, away from the eyes of men, another kind of power held sway. Whispers passed from lip to ear, carrying news of which sultan's cousin had forged a new alliance through marriage to a rival clan, or which cunning merchant had managed to smuggle precious ivory across the treacherous. In Hara, politics was a delicate art, practiced not in grand halls, but in hushed conversations and knowing glances. Here, reputation held more sway than any written law, and the words of a respected woman could shape the fate of the city as surely as any edict from the scholar prince. But for all its beauty, all its discipline and learning, Hara was not an island unto itself, immune to the pressures of the world beyond its walls. The great Oromo migrations brought new peoples to its gates. Their customs and beliefs both challenge and opportunity for the city's scholars. To the north, the Christian empire of Ethiopia loomed large, a constant reminder of the delicate balance of power in the Horn of Africa. And even within the city itself, debates raged over matters of faith and governance, testing the wisdom of its rulers and the strength of its traditions. In this crucible of competing forces, the role of rainmakers took on a significance that transcended mere weather. Their relationship with the sultans became a matter of intense political calculation. For in a land where drought could spell disaster, the ability to bring rain, or the failure to do so, could swiftly alter the fortunes of even the most learned. A season without rain could see a ruler toppled from his seat of power, thrusting the entire city into the chaos of famine or the bloodshed of war. Picture, if you will, the tension that must have filled the air during court meetings in times of drought. Advisors gathered in a grand stone hall, their faces etched with concern, as they debated strategies and interpreted omens. And there, at the center of it all, a prince standing alone at a high window, his gaze sweeping over the city he was sworn to protect and lead. In his eyes, we might see the weight of responsibility, the calculations of survival, and perhaps a silent prayer to the heavens for the gift of rain. It was in this delicate balance of forces, internal and external, natural and political, that Hara found its true strength. The city did not rely on brute force or overwhelming might to secure its place in the world. Instead, it thrived on the elegance of ideas, the subtle art of compromise, and the profound reverence for knowledge enshrined in its books and in the end, Hara stands as a testament to the power of the written word, the importance of cultural memory, and the enduring strength of a society built on learning and faith. Its walls, still standing after centuries, encircle not just a city, but an idea that knowledge, beauty, and tradition can form a bulwark against the chaos of the world, a sanctuary of the mind and spirit that endures long after empires have crumbled to dust. As the sun sets over Hara, painting its walls in hues of gold and rose, we are reminded that true power lies not in conquest or wealth, but in the stories we tell, the wisdom we pass down, and the delicate web of human connections that bind us one to another across the ages. In this city of scholars and saints, of traders and poets, we find a mirror of our own aspirations, a place where the pursuit of knowledge and the practice of faith can create a world of beauty, even in the face of life's harshest realities. Between manuscript and moonlight, the court of Hara did not sleep when the stars came out. By night, the palace library glowed with the faint shimmer of oil lamps, flickering across scrolls of parchment inked in Arabic, Oromo, and her. Knowledge was currency here exchanged between princes and poets, between elders and travelers, beneath vaulted ceilings, beneath the careful hush of barefooted scribes. The city's secrets were copied in silence. Medicinal recipes passed down from Nubian healers, treatises on astronomy referencing Nile calendar, and the fading stories of rainmakers who'd called forth storms using coded syllables now barely understood. And all around them, the wind, in this nocturnal realm of whispers and wisdom, the air itself seemed to carry the weight of centuries. The soft rustle of pages turning mingled with the gentle scratch of quills on parchment, a delicate symphony of learning that had endured through generations. Here, in the heart of Hara, time seemed to slow, each moment stretching into eternity, as scholars bent over their work, their eyes straining in the dim light. The library was a labyrinth of knowledge, its shelves reaching towards the heavens, laden with tomes both ancient and new. In one corner, a young scribe carefully transcribed a treatise on the medicinal properties of desert plants, his fingers stained with ink and his brow furrowed in concentration. Nearby, an elderly sage pored over star charts, muttering calculations under his breath as he sought to unlock the secrets of the cosmos. As the night deepened, the library's inhabitants moved with practiced ease, their bare feet padding silently across cool stone floors. They were the guardians of Hara's intellectual legacy, keepers of secrets both profound and dangerous. For in this city of learning, knowledge was not merely a pursuit, it was a weapon, a shield, and sometimes a death sentence. Hara's architecture was deliberate walls thick with lime and coral, windows designed to pull in breeze and moonlight, the garden courtyards, tucked discreetly behind the scholars' quarters, bloomed with cot and hibiscus under careful irrigation systems. But what few knew was how these gardens were watched, how informants in the palace would pass on gossip disguised as praise poetry, how every flower bloomed under both admiration and suspicion. Even knowledge, in Hara, was political. The moonlight filtered through intricately carved lattice, casting dappled shadows across the courtyard's lush foliage. Here, Amidst the heady scent of night-blooming jasmine, scholars would gather to debate philosophy and recite poetry. Their words, carried on the night breeze, might seem innocent enough, but hidden within the verses and metaphors were coded messages, critiques of the ruling class, and dangerous ideas that could topple empires. In one such garden, a group of young poets huddled together, their voices low as they shared their latest compositions. Their eyes darted nervously towards the shadows, aware that even the walls had ears in Hara. One recited a poem about a falcon soaring free above the city, a thinly veiled allegory for intellectual freedom that could cost him dearly if the wrong ears heard it. Nearby, an old man tended to the cot plants, his gnarled hands moving with practiced ease as he pruned and watered. To the untrained eye, he was nothing more than a simple gardener, but those who knew better recognized him as one of the Sultan's most trusted spies. His seemingly mundane task, a cover for gathering intelligence on the scholars and their potentially seditious ideas. The irrigation channels that snaked through the gardens were marvels of engineering, ensuring that even in the harshest drought, knowledge would continue to flourish. But these same channels also served as conduits for information. Whispered secrets flowing alongside the life-giving water. A dropped pebble in one fountain might signal a clandestine meeting, while the pattern of fallen petals in another could convey a warning of impending danger. If a scholar's interpretation of rainfall deviated too far from the Sultan's faith, he might find himself corrected quietly, or forgotten altogether. In the dimly lit interior of the 16th century Harari library, the air was thick with the scent of aged parchment and burning oil. Intricate Arabic calligraphy adorned the walls. Verses from sacred texts intertwined with secular knowledge in a dance of ink and gold leaf. Court scribes hunched over their work, their quills scratching out the official histories and decrees that would shape the narrative of Hara for generations to come. The architecture of the library itself was a testament to Harari ingenuity. High ceilings to trap the heat, cleverly placed windows to maximize natural light, and hidden alcoves where forbidden texts could be tucked away from prying eyes. Every element was designed not just for beauty, but for the preservation and protection of knowledge. As the night wore on, the moonlight shifted, casting long shadows across the library floor. In one corner, a group of scholars huddled around an ancient map, their fingers tracing trade routes and battle lines long since faded into history. Their whispered debate carried the weight of empires, for in Hara, even the past was a battleground to be contested and Across the room, a young scribe paused in his work, his eyes drawn to the garden visible through an arched window. For a moment, he allowed himself to dream of a world where knowledge flowed as freely as the water in the irrigation channels, unbound by the constraints of politics and power. But such thoughts were dangerous in Hara, where even the dreams of scholars were subject to scrutiny. This city, for all its beauty, was not naive. It knew that wisdom could shield you, but only if your words didn't offend the winds of power. In the deepest part of the night, when even the most diligent scholars had retired to their quarters, the library took on an almost mystical quality. The oil lamps burned low, their flames dancing with shadows that seemed to hold secrets of their own. It was in these quiet hours that the true magic of Hara revealed itself, a convergence of past and present, of earthly knowledge and celestial mystery. The wind whispered through the corridors, carrying with it the echoes of long-forgotten voices. Scholars of ages past seemed to linger in the air, their presence a reminder of the weight of history that rested upon the shoulders of those who now walked these halls. In Hara, the pursuit of knowledge was not merely an academic exercise, was a sacred duty, a continuation of a legacy that stretched back through the centuries. As the first hints of dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, the library stirred once more. Scribes and scholars emerged from their quarters, ready to resume their never-ending quest for understanding. They moved with purpose, each step a testament to their dedication to preserving and expanding the vast tapestry of human knowledge. Yet even as they bent to their tasks, a sense of caution pervaded the air. For in Hara, the line between enlightenment and heresy was thin indeed. A misplaced word, a theory too radical, could spell doom for even the most respected scholar. The weight of this knowledge hung heavy over the library, a constant reminder of the precarious balance between intellectual freedom and political reality. As the sun rose higher, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Hara awakened to a new day. The night's secrets were carefully tucked away, hidden beneath layers of metaphor and allegory. The scholars resumed their public faces, their dangerous ideas concealed behind masks of conformity and obedience. But beneath it all, in the whispered conversations and coded writings, in the careful tending of hidden gardens, and the preservation of forbidden texts, the true spirit of Hara lived on. For as long as there were those willing to risk everything in pursuit of knowledge, the flame of wisdom would continue to burn bright, defying the winds of power that sought to extinguish it. And so, as it had for centuries, Hara continued its delicate dance between manuscript and moonlight, between the pursuit of truth and the demands of survival. In this city of scholars and spies, of poets and politicians, knowledge remained the most precious currency of all, a treasure to be guarded, shared, and wielded with the utmost care. In the ancient city of Hara, where spices perfumed the air and faith intertwined with commerce, the miracle of rain was not merely a gift from the heavens. It was a carefully orchestrated dance between the sacred and the mercantile, paid for in full and in faith by those who understood the delicate balance between prosperity and divine favor. Picture, if you will, the merchants of Hara, their striped shawls billowing in the dry wind, the scent of cardamom clinging to their skin like a second nature. These were not mere traders of cloth, salt, and incense. No, they were the silent architects of miracles, the financiers of the sacred rituals that kept the lifeblood of their city flowing. As the sun beat down mercilessly on the parched earth, these merchant princes would quietly set in motion the intricate machinery of rainmaking. For before a rainmaker could ascend the hallowed plateau to beseech the heavens, a great deal of earthly preparation was required. Someone had to purchase the charcoal for drawing mystical circles upon the ground, procure the pristine white cloth that would drape the rainmaker's shoulders, and select the animal that would be either spared or sacrificed to appease the capricious gods of precipitation. And let us not forget the crowds, the faithful masses who would gather too fast alongside the rainmaker, their voices raised in song, their bodies swaying in anticipation of the first life-giving drops. These too needed sustenance, for even in times of drought, the human spirit must be fed. Who but the wealthy spice trader or the lordly caravan master could shoulder such a burden? These were men whose fortunes, though built on the bustling commerce of the Red Sea, were inextricably bound to the success of crops far inland. As dusk fell and the stars emerged like pinpricks in the velvet sky, the merchant patrons would retreat to their courtyards, their fingers steeped in prayer, their hearts heavy with the weight of their investment. For make no mistake, this was an investment, one that carried with it all the risk and potential reward of any worldly venture. When the rains came on time, falling in sheets of silver that transformed the dusty streets into rivers of promise, the merchant's generosity was lauded far and wide. In the mosques, his name was spoken with reverence. In the courtyards, poets wove verses praising his foresight and faith. His store, already a hub of activity, would see even more traffic, as grateful farmers and herders sought to repay their debt of gratitude through trade. and in the intricate dance of alliances and bloodlines that governed Harari society, his children found themselves sought after, their marriages becoming the stuff of legend and song. But what of those times when the skies remained stubbornly, cruelly clear, when day after scorching day passed without a single cloud to offer hope? It was then that the whispers began, slithering through the narrow alleyways like venomous snakes. Perhaps, some would murmur, the Rainmaker had been bribed by a rival merchant, his powers turned to serve another's interests. Or could it be that the merchant himself had offended God? His wealth accrued through means that invited divine displeasure. Still others wondered if the very act of sponsoring the ritual had been cursed from the start. Too greedy, too loud, in its proclamation of mortal power over nature's whims. In the face of such speculation, even the mightiest merchant could find his influence waning, his carefully cultivated networks of trust and obligation fraying at the edges. For, in Hara, a city where belief and survival were woven together as tightly as the threads of a prayer rug, even miracles had to be managed with the utmost discretion. As we pan our gaze across the sun-baked landscape, we see the bustling spice stalls of 16th century, their vibrant awnings offering scant protection from the relentless heat. Merchants in flowing robes haggle over sacks of cinnamon and cloves, their voices a cacophony of languages from across the known world. In the distance, a caravan of camels lumbers towards the city gates, their backs laden with precious goods from far-flung lands. Amidst this scene of commerce and cultural exchange, we catch glimpses of a deeper, more solemn purpose. A group of elders huddles in the shadow of a mosque, their weathered faces etched with concern as they discuss the latest failed attempt to bring rain. Nearby, a young apprentice carefully measures out portions of myrrh and frankincense, destined not for trade but for the intricate rituals of rainmaking. As the day wears on, we witness the subtle shift in the city's rhythm. Merchants begin to close their stalls earlier than usual, their eyes darting nervously towards the cloudless sky. In quiet corners, deals are struck not for spices or textiles, but for the services of renowned rainmakers from distant lands. The air thrums with a palpable tension, a collective holding of breath as an entire city waits for salvation to fall from above. With the approach of dusk, our attention is drawn to a secluded courtyard where preparations for the next rain ritual are underway. Servants scurry about, laying out intricate patterns of salt and colored sands, while others carefully unfurl lengths of pristine white cloth. In the center of it all stands the Rainmaker, his face a mask of concentration as he communes with unseen forces. And then, as if in answer to the city's desperate prayers, we see it a gathering of clouds on the distant horizon, their edges tinged with the promise of rain. The wind picks up, carrying with it the scent of moisture and hope. In homes and marketplaces across Harar, people pause in their activities, their faces turned skyward in a mixture of awe and trepidation. For in this moment, suspended between drought and deliverance, the true power of Harar's merchant princes is revealed. It is not measured in gold or spices, nor in the number of caravans they command. Rather, it lies in their ability to bridge the gap between the mundane and the miraculous, to transform wealth into faith, and faith into the very water that sustains life as the first drops begin to fall. Pattering against sun-baked roofs and parched earth, we are reminded that, in Hara, the question was never simply who made it rain. It was always about who paid for it, who dared to place their fortune and reputation on the altar of communal survival. And perhaps most importantly, it was about the cost not just in coin, but in the delicate balance of power and nature that governed this ancient crossroads of culture and commerce. In the end, as the rain falls in earnest and the city erupts in joyous celebration, we are left to ponder the true nature of miracles in a world where even the most sacred acts are bound by the laws of supply and demand. For in horror, as in life itself, it is often those who stand at the intersection of belief and pragmatism who hold the power to shape destiny one raindrop at a time. In the end, to be a rainmaker in the ancient city of Aksum was to carry the weight of heaven on your shoulders, and the burden of every eye watching below. It was not just the rituals, the fasting, or the secret incantations that made it perilous. It was the silence that sometimes followed them, the silence of a sky that would not yield, the silence of an emperor whose patience was wearing thin, the silence of a farmer gazing out at his withering teff fields. But in that silence, there were also whispers of Emperor Zana who balanced tradition with transformation, of priest scholars who turned ancient wisdom into living knowledge, of obelisks etched with symbols, not to boast but to bridge earth and sky, and of traders who brought not only frankincense, but faith in the unseen. Tonight, under the gentle sway of acacia branches, we have journeyed through a realm carved in stone and woven with legend. We have felt the weight of rain not just as droplets, but as blessing, curse, and memory. So, as your eyelids grow heavy and the night wraps its velvet cloak around you, let your final thought be this: rain does not always descend from the heavens. Sometimes it rises from the earth, from hope, from desperation, from the silent prayer that echoes in the heart of every living thing. In Oxum, the Rainmaker's art was more than mere spectacle. It was a delicate dance between the seen and unseen, a negotiation with forces beyond mortal comprehension. Each gesture, each whispered word, carried the weight of centuries. The Rainmaker stood not just before the sky, but before history itself. In one hand, they held the ancient traditions passed down through generations. In the other, the fragile hopes of a people whose very existence hung in the balance of each passing cloud. And yet, for all their power, the Rainmakers were but human. They, too, felt fear. They, too, knew doubt. In the long nights, when the stars seemed cold and distant, they wondered if their voices still reached the heavens. But come dawn, they would rise. They would climb the sacred hills, their robes billowing in the dry wind. And there, between earth and sky, they would begin their work anew. For in Oxum, rain was more than water. It was life itself. It was the tears of ancestors, the blood of the earth, the very breath of creation. To summon it was to reach into the heart of existence and coax forth its essence. The city watched and waited. In the narrow streets and grand plazas, in humble homes and royal chambers, every eye turned skyward, every ear strained for the first rumble of thunder, and when the rains came, if they came, it was as if the world itself exhaled. The parched earth drank deeply, the withered crops stirred with new life, and the people danced in the muddy streets, their faces turned upward in joyous disbelief. But if the skies remained stubbornly clear, the silence grew heavier still. The Rainmaker would return, head bowed, to face the questions, the accusations, the desperate pleas, for in their hands lay not just the fate of crops, but of an entire civilization. Yet even in failure, there was a kind of magic, for it was in these moments of deepest doubt that the true strength of Oxum revealed itself. People came together, sharing what little they had, finding hope in the smallest gestures of kindness. And perhaps, in this unity, in this refusal to surrender to despair, lay a power greater than any Rainmaker's art. A force that could sustain a people through the darkest drought, the harshest trial. So tonight, as you drift towards sleep, remember the Rainmakers of Oxum. Remember their courage, their faith, their unwavering commitment to a calling that defied reason itself. And in your dreams, may you hear the soft patter of rain on ancient stones, May you feel the cool touch of mist on your skin. May you taste the sweetness of water drawn from the very heart of the earth. For in Oxum, as in all places where humans dare to dream, the impossible is merely waiting for the right moment to become real. Good night, seeker of ancient wisdom. May your slumber be blessed with visions of green fields and flowing streams, and may you awaken to a world renewed by the magic of unseen hands.